Go. Okay. Welcome back to the Congregation of Yahweh for the sermon for the 3 o'clock service. I'm glad you're out there. If you're out there, unfortunately, not as many people out there as I wish we would get, because there was, during the Bible study, there was 6, and I was one of them. Because what I do is I have a cell phone, and I enter the scriptures, as they call out the scriptures when they don't mumble. To allow people, because I'm hard of hearing, and so sometimes if you don't enunciate, I don't get the full word. And really, it's been bad with COVID. When they put the mask on, I went deaf. Because I didn't realize that until then, that I read their lips as much as I read and listened to them to get the whole thing. I can listen to a radio program because there's nothing else to distract me. But when it comes to television, I have to use closed caption. I'm telling my age and all of this. Right before the feast, I turned 74. Yeah, I'm still alive. I have moved from Dallas to up to Paris, Texas. I bought 8 acres out. I have a house in town, and I bought 8 acres outside of town with the purpose of preparing it, especially with the COVID thing. If the government starts locking down, making certain requirements, then there's a place that we can have a feast site if necessary. So, they installed the water meter.
What?
While we were gone. And a guy that put in my driveway in Colbert gave me a disc plow. I have a 72-year-old tractor. So, old age does do you well. And so they did that. And then during the feast, I come across somebody that a family member wants to get rid of a 20-foot container for about half of what everybody else is asking, because he doesn't want his brother-in-law to have it. And it's on his property. So I'm working on that. So that's just to give you an idea of the things that I'm looking forward to. And also, for those that are out there and those that get the disc, you can call me anytime. My number is 900-900-0343. I take phone calls anytime, day or night, because I always have that now I have that cell phone welded to me. I didn't like them at first. But going on with the study, I skipped these chapters at the feast, because I wanted to get into what was being said in chapters 27, 28, 29. But we're going back now to chapter 17 of Deuteronomy. Verse 1 of chapter 17. This is kind of titled Legal Decisions. You shall not sacrifice to Yahweh your Elohim an ox or a sheep in which is a defect, or anything evil. I don't know sure it's exactly what they meant by evil there, but for that is an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. In some cases, that people are willing to go out and sacrifice an animal to their God. Yes?
In 1 Samuel, we have the counsel of behavior of the sons of Eli, the priest. They did a lot of stuff like that. You'll get some detail out of that. I'll just refer you to it.
Yeah.
In
1 Samuel.
No, I did 1 Samuel, because it's talking about the sons of Eli.
That's very early in the story.
Very early in the story. But here, the main point he's saying is that he should get the best. If you're going to sacrifice something, it should be the best. Mm-hmm. It should not be defective. This is one of the things that I used when we were doing the study on determining the beginning of the year, when we were dealing with the groups that basically use barley as the beginning of the year. And I would watch, for a number of years, I watched their website where they would go out and they would gather the barley that they said was Aviv to start the year. And it went anything from a grain, which was not a grain yet, it was just a little blister. Because see, on barley, it waits until the nighttime temperature gets above freezing, and then it will send out of the main chute these little husks. There'll be a group of them, and then it will start filling with a starch, and then that starch will get more developed and goes from a clear liquid to what you'd think of a white paste to the hard grain that you actually get. But I would watch them, and they're determined in the beginning of the year, and one of the things they would do is, if that blister had liquid in it and they could get it to leave a spot in a frying pan, they considered it Aviv. All the way up to fully developed grain. So this one always hit me is, how can you bring yourself to offer to Yahweh in the wave sheaf offering something that was not perfect, was not fully developed? That was one of the criteria I used when we decided that. Well, there's another thing with barley. The putting out the grain is called, as they use the term, vernalization. I thought it was very interesting that it means almost the same as vernal equinox. Mm-hmm. And so we made quite a bit of study. It took us nearly 2 years to come up with what we now use as our formula. Let's see. First, conjunction new moon, that's the dark one, on or after the day of the vernal equinox. Because we also discovered that during our research, the only year that we could get a middle of the week crucifixion was in 30 AD. And in 30 AD, the vernal equinox and the dark new moon occurred on the same day. And I mean, when you put things, Yahweh put it in effect. It takes, like I said, it's for us to search it out and to find it. Okay? Going on back to Deuteronomy 17, verse 2. If there is found among you within any of your gates which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, a man or woman who does that which is evil in Yahweh your Elohim's sight, in transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods. Because only when it's pagan gods, I'll use the word gods, because I want to separate it from Yahweh with Elohim. Served other gods and worship them, or the sun, or the moon, or any of the stars of the sky, which I have not commanded. I had problems when I heard that there were groups out there that when they would go out and spot, well, they were spotting the crescent, then they would dance around and sing praise. Well, who are you singing praise to? Oh, we're singing it to God, or to Yahweh. But why are you doing it with that moon? Can't you do it any other time? And so, again, I kind of digress at times, because this is probably one of the most, I guess you could say, determining factors for when we keep the holy days of Yahweh. And verse 4, and you are told, and you have heard of it, then you shall inquire diligently, talking about if you hear anyone that's doing this, behold, if it is true and the thing is certain, that such abomination is done in Israel, then you shall bring out that man or that woman who has done this evil thing to your gates, even that same man or woman, you shall stone them to death with stones. That is a horrifying death. It is not something fun, and it's also incumbent on all of the adults to take part, because that is to impress upon the minds of those there the horror that when you go against Yahweh, or you turn away from Yahweh and you're brought to be stoned, how bad it is, because it's not something that's I used to say glorifying, because there's one thing about it: they can't repent once they're dead. So Yahweh wanted to make sure that the people understood the horror of it and what the full extent. The only problem is when they quit enforcing it. And it's like here in this country, when we had death penalty, it had an effect on those that were considering killing someone. But then when they started doing life sentences, and they started doing manslaughter, and they started doing all these other things and trying to split it up, it lost its effect. And then, especially if you can go in and bargain your way down from murder to manslaughter, you just go get to sit in a jail and get fed 3 times a day. Don't even have to work in some cases. Like I said, I tend to go with when I read these things. Then it says here in verse 6, and this is the other important part of this stage. At the hand at the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, he who is to die shall be put to death. Not on the word of 1 person, it takes the word of 2 people or 3. And there's another aspect of that. It means that those 2 or 3 actually observed the same event or the same sin. Not just because you think it's something or somebody told you about it, you're not a witness. They are. They want to, even today, you cannot testify in a court in this country about something somebody else told you, unless it came out of the mouth of the person who did it. So, in verse 7, the hand of the witnesses, that's the other aspect of this thing. The hand of the witnesses shall be first on him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So shall you remove evil from among you. They can't repeat. There are also legal decisions by priests and judges. Verse 8, if there arises a matter too hard for you in judgment, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, and between stroke and stroke, between matters of controversy within your gates, then you shall arise and go to the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. You shall come to the priests who are, notice this, Levites, and to the judge who shall be in those days. You shall inquire, and they shall give you the verdict. You shall do according to the decisions of the verdict which they shall give to you from that place which Yahweh chooses. You shall observe to do according to all that they teach you. See, here's one of the things you have to think about it. When you come to an elder or a minister or a pastor or whatever and ask, would you please take a look at this and give me your judgment? At the point that person gives you the judgment, you have to follow it 100%. There's no deviating, and there's no, well, I'll go get somebody else's opinion. That you ask for that, that's what Yahweh recognizes. Because, we don't make opinions just off the cuff, or because we like you or we don't like you. It's based on what the evidence is before us. Let's see. Verse 11, according to the decisions of the law which they shall teach you, and according to the judgments which they shall tell you, you shall do. You shall not turn away from the sentence which they shall show you at the right hand or the left. The man who does presumptuously. If you get a chance, do a word study on this word presumptuously. Because it's something that you do willfully. Not just you do it by accident. You just happen to not paying attention and just do something by accident or not thinking. It's something that you literally know that you should not do, and then you do it. The man who does presumptuously is not listening to the priest who stands to minister there before Yahweh your Elohim, or to the judge, even that man shall die. See, that takes on another penalty. You shall put away the evil from Israel. All the people shall hear and fear and do no more presumptuously. The guy that was out in the camp picking up sticks on the Sabbath, it said that he did presumptuously. That's why he died, because he did it contrary to what he knew was he shouldn't be doing. Verse 14, laws concerning Israel's kings. When you have come to the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, and possess it, and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are around me, you shall surely set him king over yourselves, whom Yahweh your Elohim chooses. Because see, this king, they didn't get to choose the king. Yahweh chose the king, starting with Saul. Okay? You shall set as king over you one from among your brothers. You may not put a foreigner over you, who is not your brother. Only he shall not multiply horses to himself. Part of that is to dealing with raising an army. Horses were very, like having tanks and armor and everything. In that time period, they were the ones that helped move the battle and really turn the tide on most battles. Only he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he may multiply horses, because that's where the horses were in Egypt. Because Yahweh has said to you, you shall not go back that way again. He shall not multiply wives to himself. What does that make you think about? Does that make you think of? Both David and Solomon. David not as bad as Solomon. So, but he was talking about it, because I know that everybody thinks it's funny, but one wife at a time is enough. Okay?
I've been married to this woman 40 years, and I still get surprised almost every week.
That's true. You get surprises. I was married for 50 years, 9 months. And
you know what I'm talking about.
She kept me in order. But you can only have one, because then if you got a second one, there's a tug. Which one of them do you make happy today? So anyway, he shall not multiply wives, verse 17, to himself, that his heart not turn away. He shall not greatly multiply to himself silver and gold, accumulating vast amounts of wealth. It shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write himself a copy of this law in a book out of that which is before the priests, the Levites. So he was to sit down and hand copy the first 5 books.
Amen.
That way he would, if he's like me, I have to see things. I have to visualize things. It makes it a whole lot easier doing anything else. When I worked for the city of Dallas, I was a code enforcement officer, and the areas that I worked in, I could tell you what the color of the house was on each corner, because that was my reference points, and how things were, and how things had changed between, I go by and look at this property, it looked like this. I had to come back and check and see if they corrected. And so you had to have more of a visual memory than you did a written memory. When I was taking Hebrew classes, that used to throw the Hebrew teacher for a loop, because I couldn't put together a sentence. If you told me to create a sentence right now, I couldn't do that. And if I wrote one down, I'd be lucky if I could get more than 6 or 7 words in it, and that would take me 2 hours to make sure that I have it in the right syntax, I have it in the right, I had the verb in the right place, the adverb in the right place, I had the possessives on them on either end. It's things like that. But she used to, what got her attention was, she'd ask me a question and I would stare off in the distance, because in my mind I was seeing what she was asking. The page in the workbook, the events we'd done, or what she wrote on the bulletin board to try to answer her question. It wasn't just pulling it out of here; it was pulling it out of a visual memory. And it is what that does. And It hones in on you. If you ever want to give it a chance, do it yourself. If you really want to make it complicated, do it in Hebrew. And include the vowel points. Those vowel points are not to distract you. It's not to bring in something else. The vowel points was when they started losing their, let's go back to the Paleo-Hebrew. Paleo-Hebrew, the letter had the vowel included in its sound. So they didn't have any vowels in the, separate. They was all included in the letter. Well, when they went from that version of, I'll think of it in a minute, over, and when they went into Babylon, when they came back with that block letter, okay, it didn't have that sound. It was just, that was it. It didn't, and when you put them together, it just sounded like you were trying to clear your throat. But with the vowel, then they had to add the vowel points to remember how it was pronounced originally. So that's what the Mizrahites did. All they did was put in. You take an English sentence and take out all the vowels and all the words and see if you can't still read it. Okay? Well, they were having to put the vowels back in because they had lost the ability to sound out the words. These were words also that were no longer basically in the mainland, I guess you could say the secular world of Israel. These were words that were only used in the temple when they read from the scroll, or in the synagogues when they read from the scroll. So it was an idea, because the other thing I found interesting in doing this class was that you realize that Abraham went from up in Ur of the Chaldees, which is now part of Iran, down through into Canaan and on down to Egypt. And yet was able in Canaan to sit down and negotiate a burial spot. To have a long discussion when the king Pharaoh finally realized that Sarah was more than just his sister. I'm talking about, you're bringing sin on us. Okay? These are things you just don't get. If I go and speak to somebody in Spanish, I have no idea what they're saying, other than occasional words. But this area of the Middle East, all these countries, realizing once, they were descendants of Shem, Noah's Shem. So they all had a basic spoken language that was the same. The alphabet is the only thing that's different. Even in Egypt, they have a written, what do we call that term when you write something out in longhand or it's the thing they no longer teach in schools here. Cursive. So you see the what they have on the carved on their monuments. That was one alphabet or words, and there were picture words. Then the cursive is, I'm trying to remember the name of that particular alphabet. But anyway, I'm getting at here is the Paleo was the original Aramaic that rolled over into the block letter Aramaic. So all they're trying to do is give you a representation, something that you as a person, if you know the language, you can go back and read it and understand it. Arabic is similar. Arabic actually became the first one to use vowel points because they had a problem that they were starting to lose knowledge of old words that were contained in contracts because it wasn't being used in regular language. And so that's a long way around, but I'm getting away from my subject again. But let's see, it says here, going back, he shall write himself a copy of this law in a book out of that which is before the priests, the Levites. It shall be with him, And he shall read from it all the days of his life. So he wasn't only just to write it, he was to read it over and over and over to remind him. Because there's one thing I've learned in looking at Scripture. You can read a verse today, tomorrow, next week, and it may be 6 months from now when it finally makes sense. When you get the context for what it is. At the time, it really doesn't make a whole lot, or I'll put it this way, you fly over it without really looking at all the words. That he may learn to fear Yahweh his Elohim, to keep all the words of this law and these statutes to do them, that his heart not be lifted up above his brothers, and that he turn not away from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the middle of Israel. Yes, Robert.
Back up in verse 16, let's talk about multiplying horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt. And part of the bondage of Israel in Egypt was the heavy taxation.
Yep.
And see, the only way you can purchase all these horses and things or build an army is to tax the people heavily, which in effect puts them in bondage to the king or to the government.
Yeah.
So that's
Like we are today.
Yes.
I said, like we are today.
Yeah.
With that $83 billion that was left behind in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so the heavy taxation is that reference to Egypt, because that's part of what happened to them. They were taxed heavily, which set them in bondage.
Yeah. Well, he was also trying to point to them all of the, I guess you could say, the downside of having a king. Maybe you do have a king like everybody else does. But does that mean that he's going to be positive? Because there's one thing with a king, they have absolute control. Their word is law, no matter how good it is. David had a man killed because he was having an affair with the guy's wife. That's just how much power that a king has. That he can order it, and actually somebody else will actually do the murder. And I think one thing about it. Chapter 18, verse 1. Yeah, okay. The priests, the Levites, all the tribe of Levi shall have no portion nor inheritance with Israel. They shall eat the offerings of Yahweh made by fire and his portion. They shall have no inheritance among their brothers. Yahweh is their inheritance, as he has spoken to them. Meaning they didn't have land to go out there and build their own farm and do all of that with. They had cities of refuge. We will get into that later. This shall be the priest's due from the people, from those who offer sacrifice, whether it be ox or sheep, that they shall give to the priest the shoulder. Always in all the sacrifices, the priest gets the shoulder, I don't know what you would call that, chunk of meat. The two cheeks, I don't think I've ever eaten cheeks. And the inner parts, meaning the organ. Okay. The first fruits of your grain, of your new wine, of your oil, and the first of the fleece of your sheep you shall give him. When you get a chance, if you haven't done before, go through Leviticus. Again, we already gone through it, but Leviticus, where he's talking about the responsibilities of the priests. Because the priests were the actual first intercessors.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that intercession was when you brought this animal to be sacrificed, that shoulder that he received, because it didn't require the high priest to do these. It only required a Levitical priesthood of the lineage of Aaron to do these. And so, when they put up the cities of refuge, that allowed the people somewhere to go without having to take that sacrifice and travel all the way down to Jerusalem from up in northern or in the southern parts of Israel. They could do it. Well, when you went to it, whoever was available, whichever priest was available that day, he would go through the sacrifice with you. Made sure that you drained all the blood out at the base of the altar, that you skinned it, You cut it up. The kidneys, always, and the fat, the loose fat. We're not talking about the fat in the meat. We're talking about the loose fat. Was all burnt on the altar to Yahweh. So when the English talk about kidney pie, they're really violating Yahweh's law. It shouldn't be eaten. It's Yahweh's. A lot of people don't look at things like that, but I like to look at the fact that Yahweh never stopped that from being true. But then the rest of the animal, the person who sacrificed took it home, and they had a meal with it. And the priest, all the priests that were sanctified, were required to eat of that piece of that shoulder that was offered to them. The rest, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Part of it went to the priest that did the slaughter. The priest that did the slaughter also got the fleece off the animal. The other, there was a part that the owner took home to fix for his family, and the rest of it was burnt as a sacrifice to Yahweh. So you have to go through and look at each one of these. But the main thing was here, if they did not eat of this meat, the forgiveness that Yahweh gave as part of that was not applied. That's where they became the intercessory. That's why they had to be sanctified when they did these sacrifices. It was because the sin that he was sacrificing for really passed on to them, but it didn't kill them because they were sanctified as long as they did the eating of the flesh. Because on the day that Aaron's two sons went in with the strange fire and died, Moses come back later that evening and was chastising Aaron and his sons because they had not eaten of the sacrifice of that day. And he made them understand that they had to eat of it. It was very responsible. It was one of their responsibilities. But he says,
for clarity,
yes, sir.
When you said they eat it of it, did they cook it or
Yeah.
did they? Okay.
They had a barbecue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Works for me.
They were the best. They were the best fed people that there was, because they ate meat 7 days a week. Because you think of how many people sinned and how many had to come and bring a sacrifice. So they ate well when it came to. They were on the Atkins diet before everybody knew about the Atkins diet.
And there were no vegans?
Nope, no vegans. I've gone round and round with a guy on the telephone because he believes that we're sinning by eating meat. And I said, well, all these sacrifices. But at the same time, really what his term was, he loves animals. He didn't think that we had the right to take the life of an animal. That was his point, not because of the fact that Yahweh required that sacrifice. Because after Adam and Eve sinned, Yahweh prepared a sacrifice, the very first one, because he dressed them with the skins of the animals.
Now, Yahweh really wanted us as human beings to understand the cost of our sin, that it requires something to die.
Die. Well, later on, for them, it's their wealth. Technically, you're taking money away from them. When they have to bring in and sacrifice that animal, he's losing part of his herd that can possibly produce more animals. Cain and Abel, that sacrifice, what they came, Abel came with a meat sacrifice. Cain came with vegetables. Cain was a vegetarian. Okay, so verse 5 of chapter 18. For Yahweh your Elohim has chosen him, meaning Levite, out of all your tribes to stand to minister in Yahweh's name, him and his sons forever. If a Levite comes from any of your gates out of all Israel, where he lives as a foreigner, and comes with all the desire of his soul to the place which Yahweh shall choose, then he shall minister in the name of Yahweh his Elohim, as all his brothers the Levites do, who stand there before Yahweh. They shall have their portions to eat, in addition to which comes from the sale of his family's possessions. Abominable practices. Verse 9 of chapter 18. Deuteronomy. When you have come into the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, you shall not learn to imitate the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found with you anyone who makes his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices sorcery, or an enchanter or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or a consulter with a familiar spirit, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For whoever does these things is an abomination to Yahweh. Because of these abominations, Yahweh your Elohim drives them out from before you. That's what's going on within the land of Canaan. This is why he said that there would be a time period that their time was not yet, while the Israelites were down in Egypt for 430 years. Because they were going to be Yahweh's judgment against the ones in the land for all of the sins that they had committed. One of the other things I like to think about is, or I should say consider, is the fact that all of these people are familiar with Yahweh. Even the ones in Canaan. They're descendants of Noah. Okay? So all of their forefathers knew about sacrifices, knew about Yahweh, knew about everything that went on. So, I mean, these people are not some alien group that just dropped down out of the sky on the Canaan. They're all descendants. They're all cousins of the Israelites. Especially when you get over into Moab, which is Lot's son by his daughter. You have all of these people related to one another. And even today, yes?
Yeah, and I was just going to say that, I mean, it's really perverse, the adversary copying Yahweh, where Yahweh commanded people to sacrifice animals, and he turned around and says, sacrifice your children.
Yeah.
He's copying it, but it's more perverse and wicked.
Right. Well, the other thing you were talking about that with, you have Jacob had 12 sons. His older brother, now I can't think of his name now.
Esau.
No. Uncle, I guess you would say. Isaac's brother. Ishmael. He also had 12 sons.
Right.
And they believed that they are the ones that should get the birthright instead of Jacob's 12. And that's part of what you're dealing with Islam. Is that battle over birthrights. Let's see, where is it? Verse 13. He makes it very clear. You shall be perfect with Yahweh your Elohim. For these nations that you have dispossessed, listen to those who practice sorcery and to diviners. But as for you, Yahweh your Elohim has not allowed you to do. Verse 15. This is kind of talking about here is a new prophet like Moses. Moses was considered a prophet in Yahweh's eyes. Verse 15, Yahweh your Elohim will raise up to you a prophet from among you, of your brothers like me, you shall listen to him. This is a prophecy about something that's going to happen in the very far future for them. This according to all that you desire Yahweh your Elohim in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again my Elohim's voice, neither let me see this great fire anymore, that I not die. Yahweh said to me, they have well said that which they have spoken. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brothers. Like you, I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I shall command him. Aaron's already dead, so you can't say it's going to be Aaron. It shall happen that whoever will not listen to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. Meaning he's going to be guilty. But the prophet who speaks a word presumptuously, there's that word presumptuously again, in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that same prophet shall die. You may say in your heart, how shall we know the word which Yahweh has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in Yahweh's name, if the thing doesn't follow, it doesn't come about, it's not fulfilled, nor happen, that is the thing which Yahweh has not spoken. That prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You shall not be afraid of him. I went through organizations that prophesied that we were all going to Petra, to the place of safety, the first Sunday in January of 1972. My wife and I walked into Petra in August of 2000, and they weren't there. Okay? And other ones I've run across, they when that didn't come through, then they moved the date from 72 to 75, and then another one, and then they just quit prophesying at all, and eventually dissolved. No longer keep the Sabbath, the holy days, or anything else. They went back to the Baptist church and resumed their life. But it's interesting to watch what goes on. Chapter 19, verse 1, when Yahweh your Elohim cuts off the nations whose land Yahweh your Elohim gives you, and you succeed them and dwell in their cities and in their houses. That was one of the things. When they came into Israel, when they crossed to Jericho, all of these people, after they had heard all of the things that had happened on the other side of the Jordan, because basically Israel slaughtered man, woman, child throughout the area on the east side of the Jordan River. They burned the cities. They burned their granaries. They kept the cattle, and they kept the silver and the gold, and it went into the treasury for the temple, or for the tabernacle first, and then the temple later on. So they'd already had that. So you can go back and read in Joshua about and I can't think of her name, the spy, anyway. Rahab. And she was telling them, we already heard everything that's happened since you came out of Egypt. So, we're terrified. So basically they could not move all of their grain and their animals into Jericho, but they could move the people in enough what they could think would survive a siege. Yes?
But she also recognized that it was Yahweh that did those things.
Oh, yes.
And when Yahweh told, as you pointed out earlier, that it was Yahweh's judgment against these nations, because again, Yahweh gave them time.
Gave time
to Abraham.
They gave him over 430 years.
Right. He said that the sin of the Amorites was not yet full, so he gave them plenty of time. So when he released Israel, that was it. He used them to execute judgment against them. So, people look at, why did Yahweh tell them to kill man, woman, and child and spare none? It's because, well, one, Yahweh, the children are going to be resurrected. Sometimes Yahweh takes life to preserve it.
Yeah.
And so we may not understand what Yahweh is doing, but it looks horrible to us, but Yahweh has his purpose. And so
I misspoke on one part of that. He didn't kill all the females.
Yeah.
He killed all the females that had known a man. All the virgins they took, and after they went through a process, they became Israelite wives. I mean, that was a process that they did, because you think about it, they've been in there for 38 years. How many boys were born compared to how many girls? So you have this imbalance. You can't really, for a nation to survive, you cannot have an imbalance of sexes. Otherwise, it deviates into other deviations. China's going through it, so is India.
What about a little confusion here? What you just said is that it was only virgins, but
Right.
Rahab was saved, and she actually became a husband of one of the Israelites.
Right. Boaz. That became her husband. No, I'm sorry. Down the line.
I think it was
Down the
Perez.
Ruth was one that became
Perez is right.
Perez. And didn't he beget Boaz?
They're
Well,
in
either
the
way,
lineage.
one of the things that I love about the story of Ruth and Boaz is that Boaz was a half-breed, and no Israelite man would give it, but God brought one, a Moabitess, who said, "Let your God be my God, and your people be my people."
well, she was still a distant cousin.
Yeah.
Lot was being her great-great-grandfather. Yes.
And to that question, Rahab made a confession. You know, that's how she became an Israelite by faith, even though she was of the people who should have been destroyed. But that's why her life was spared, and that she actually married into Israel because of her confession of faith.
So I'm not
But basically over on the other side of the river was the main, killed everybody, except the virgins.
On the other side.
Thank you.
The, okay, 19:1. When Yahweh your Elohim cuts off the nations whose land Yahweh your Elohim gives you, and you succeed them and dwell in their cities and in their houses. That was what I was going to make a point. You had houses already standing that they could just move into. They had fields of grain that was ready to be harvested. All they had to do was harvest it. They had, I'm trying to think of anything else that was involved. But everything was there for them to move into. Yahweh provided it. He said he would provide it for them when they came in. He only asked that they do a offering or sacrifice to him. The wave sheep offering was required, and it was done. When he talks about it in Joshua chapter 6, it describes all of the events there. And that was another thing that we used when we were trying to determine when to do the wave sheep offering. Because I had people that said, well, it says when you come in and have planted and done this. No, that's later on. After that happens. But when they came into the land, it was already there prepared for them. It was still Yahweh's no matter what. And they wanted to argue that they didn't do the wave sheep offering for ever how many years after because they hadn't truly occupied the land. They did it then. I'll put it to you this way. If I was Joshua, I'd have done it whether anybody else wanted to do it or not, because I'm not going back out there in that wilderness for another 40 years. Not with this group. So anyway, better get back to this. You shall set apart, verse 2, 3 cities for yourselves in the middle of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you to possess it. So Yahweh's commanding that 3 cities be set apart. You shall prepare the way and divide the borders of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim causes you to inherit into 3 parts, that every manslayer may flee there. Meaning anyone committing so much, it causes the death of a third party, of another person.
Unintentional.
Huh? Well, we'll get into that aspect. And he shall flee there. What this was a city that was set aside, that if you accidentally kill someone, if you got there before his relative got caught up to you and killed you, then you had to stay in, and we'll get into that part of it too. This is the case of the manslayer who shall flee there and live. Whoever kills his neighbor unawares, unintentionally, and didn't hate him in the time past. There was another qualification there. You never showed anger to him. Y'all had not been in a shouting match. Y'all had not had fisticuffs. As when a man goes into the forest with his neighbor to chop wood, and his hand swings the axe to cut down the tree, and the head slips off from the handle and hits his neighbor so that he dies, he shall flee to one of these cities and live. I mean, they had something for accidental death. You still caused another human to die, and this was a place for you to go. You went there, and then they assembled the judges, the witnesses, and everybody that knew anything about these two people. And then they held a court hearing. Verse 6, otherwise the avenger of blood may pursue the manslayer while his heart is hot, and overtake him because the way is long, and strike him mortally, even though he was not worthy of death, because he didn't hate him in the time past. Therefore I command you to set apart 3 cities for yourselves. If Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border, as he has sworn to your fathers, and gives you all the land which he promised to give your fathers, if you keep all his commandment to do, which I command you today, to love Yahweh your Elohim, and to walk ever in his ways, then you shall add 3 cities more for yourselves, in addition to these 3. So now we're up to 6. Because as their land became more and more, it was a greater distance to get back and to be able to get to that city. This is so, verse 10, that innocent blood will not be shed in the middle of your land, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you for an inheritance, leaving blood guilt on you. But if any man hates his neighbor, lies in wait for him, rises up against him, strikes him mortally so that he dies, and he flees into one of these cities, here's where that comes in. Then the elders of his city shall send and bring him there, and deliver him into the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. Your eye shall not pity him, but you shall purge the innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with you. Then it starts talking about property boundaries, realizing that those boundaries are just as important as anything else in the life. Deuteronomy 19:14, you shall not remove your neighbor's landmark, which they of old time have said, in your inheritance which you shall inherit in the land that Yahweh your Elohim gives you to possess. Today we call that a deed. Laws concerning witnesses, because a deed gives you starting point, and any time the boundary changes, the direction of the boundary, there is another marker until you grade all sides of the land that's in part of it. I just gone through all of that. And I'm fixing to divide that land into 2 pieces. Deuteronomy 19:15, one witness shall not rise up against a man for any iniquity. Means got to have more than one witness. Or for any sin, and any sin that he sins. At the mouth of 2 witnesses, or at the mouth of 3 witnesses, shall a matter be established. And it's not 3 different events with 3 different witnesses. It's one event with all 3 witnesses actually physically seeing it themselves. Because otherwise you can't testify to the event if you didn't see it. Verse 16, if an unrighteous witness rises up against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, somebody that really would like to see him dead, and this is his way of doing it, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before Yahweh, before the priests and the judges who shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition, meaning they're going to have a trial with witnesses. And behold, if the witness is a false witness, if somebody else can come back and say, well, he couldn't have seen that, he was over here on this date, and has other people that can back him up, and has testified falsely against his brother with the intent of the brother dying, then he shall do to him. Then you shall do to him as he had thought to do to his brother. So you shall remove evil from among you. And he gets stoned also. Or if it turns out that there's nothing against the individual that he was testifying, he's the one that dies, because he was about to commit murder on the body of the one he was witnessing against. Verse 20 of 19, those who remain shall hear and fear, and will never again commit any such evil among you. Your eyes shall not pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. Whatever they were trying to extract from the other person, if they're a false witness, that is then extracted from them. And the foot to foot and all that stuff is basically just trying to say, it doesn't matter, whatever it's involved. If he's trying to get someone to, say, lose sheep, and it's proven he's a false witness, then he has to bring in the sheep to replace. There's a penalty. Laws concerning warfare. Yes.
Did Yeshua change that to turn the other cheek in Matthew 5, verse 21?
Matthew 5:21.
5:38.
Huh?
Matthew 5:38.
Oh, Matthew 5:38.
Yeah, did he change that to say turn the other cheek?
Let me go over here and make sure I understand. Like I said, I don't have a photographic memory of verses and quotes, but I can tell you if you're wrong.
Please do 5:38, 39.
No, I'm not saying what she's
Yeah.
given is wrong. I'm just saying that
It's when it says the
Curtis can call up scripture right off the top of his head. I've never been able to accomplish that.
What was
And I'm having problems just like Robert did with us. I'm gonna run over. 5:38 says, "You have heard that it had been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn him the other cheek. And any man who sues you at law and take away your coat, let him have your cloak also." This is basically talking about items, things. It's really not talking about if you committed murder.
Did they have cities of refuge at the time Yeshua was walking around?
I don't think so, because the Romans would have been a problem. They were the only ones allowed to.
That's true, because they had to go to the Romans in order to crucify Yeshua.
Yeah. And the thing about it was, when people want to argue over that with over the crucifixion of the Messiah, it was still the chief priest that did it. It wasn't the Romans. All he did was give them permission to do according to your law. Yes.
And you also have to look too, here in Deuteronomy, the person didn't just lash out. What they did is they had to take it to the judge.
Right.
And then after the judge made the
Right.
determination, then he says you would do to them what they, and remember Yeshua said, whatever judgment you judge with, to be meted out to you, but he's the judge.
Yeah.
So it's not for you to take it into your hand. Justice still be served. But because justice corrupted, and Yeshua said this is a mindset of how you're supposed to, basically he's trying to tell them to be righteous. But he's saying still with us, because he sees, and now you don't even need a witness. Yeshua knows what's going on. So even if someone plots against you and you don't even know it,
Right.
he will still take care of it. He's the witness.
Amen.
You know, one of the things there is that when things are going downhill and there are people that are plotting against you, the simplest thing to do, ask Yahweh to take care of it.
Amen.
You don't get involved yourself, you don't take retribution, you don't avenge.
Right.
You just basically ask Yahweh to take care of it, and he works it out. So far in my life, it's worked that way. So, I may think vengeful things in my mind.
That's just
But again,
Boanerges.
huh?
That's just Boanerges.
Yeah, that's just, but I mean, you can just get in your mind, you go, then you have to realize, this is not doing you any good.
Right. That's what we're doing.
You're just getting everything upset. You're getting heartburn for nothing. You're stressing your body out. Well, it gets back to this thing. How many times do you forgive your brother?
Every single time.
Yeah, every single time, really, when you come down to it. But you know, I know it sounds simplistic, but it works.
Amen.
Because see, when you are plotting revenge, you're plotting all the things you're plotting in your mind, it's you that's hurting.
Yeah.
It is hurting you. It's doing damage to you and your personality, your everything. It makes you, well,
Can't be the light.
I don't want to be this way. But you know, it's a factor that, and then anything, if something happens to the person that's giving you a problem, don't gloat.
Amen.
But that's just as bad. Yes, Trey.
I feel like when you bring up earlier, Raquel, about Matthew, it's important because he also says how the law, you know, the spirit of the law is love. And the reason he made all these different, because he made the law, it was just 10 separate commandments. He made a bunch of, judgments and statutes
Right.
and whatever, because people were sticking to the letter of the law. So since like when you have people who are looking at just the physical, that's why it's so important to emphasize the spiritual meaning behind this. Is that, you know, it's just like we do in our justice systems now. Okay, the law says da da da, but it doesn't say da 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 damn. So he's like, all right, cool, I can do that as long as I stick outside of that, you know.
Right.
They find a way to get around these things. That's why he tried to say, like, you know, turn the other cheek. Because, like, if someone kills somebody, we're not saying it's wrong. He's going to deal with that one in the next life. He's going to deal with that either way. But don't turn yourself towards, you know, towards sin and everything. Like, you got to make sure you're going to get your revenge. You're going to do this, you know, before you bring it before people. Also, when we speak, it's like you bring your problems, your judgments between the courts and of unbelievers. He's like, what are you doing this for? You shouldn't be able to decide between yourselves. So like I said, I think it's a big emphasis on that spirit of the law, but he had to write all this down for the people because as we know, they were literally being supplied manna out of nothing, the clothes didn't wear down, and they still were in disbelief and thought they were going to perish. So he's like, that's why Yahshua had to come and be like, look, this is what we've been trying to say the whole time.
One thing, in 1 Corinthians 5, verse 1, it is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles, that one should have his father's wife. This was in the congregation that Paul had set up.
Yep.
And just like that, you have to be careful between going, as I said, letter of the law to what do you call love? Because this is what he says. And you are puffed up, and have not rather mourned that he that has done this deed might be taken away from among you. Because he was among the congregation, and they were just so, we just have love for him, we just can't put him out because, you know, he's a, you know, type thing. For I verily, as absent in the body, but present in the spirit, have judged already. He wasn't even there. Paul wasn't. As though I were present concerning him that had so done this deed. And in the name of our Master Yeshua Messiah, when you are gathered together in my spirit with the power of our Master Yeshua Messiah to deliver such a one unto Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit might be saved in the day of our Master Yeshua. Your glorying is not good. Know you not that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? And that's basically showing how it can affect. You can go from being too strict to being too lenient in a thing, in the name of love. Okay, the love is in the middle.
Yeah.
Chastise him, correct it, take care of the problem. Same way with kids.
That's what you do.
Chastise them, take care of the problem, because they're looking for a standard. They're looking to their parents. When people come into religion, they're looking for stability. They're looking for something that they can grasp that doesn't change. And it's like with kids. They would rather go tell their friends, I can't do this because my parent says no. Then the parents not say anything, the child goes with them, and the group decides to commit a robbery. And he's ruined for life, or she. I'm not trying to pick on the guys. Yes, Robert?
Yeah, well, love is the love of Yahweh is not accepting evil. See,
Right.
and that's what a lot of people mistake.
Right.
We hate the sin, but
love the sinner.
But love the sinner.
Yes.
But people have extended that to show love for the sinners to accept the sin, and
Yeah.
that's not the case.
That's not the case.
To speak the truth in love, and we're supposed to correct one another, but we're not. As we discussed at the feast, we don't pass a condemnation on the person, but we definitely make a stand against the sin. And if the person is not willing or unwilling to cease, then there has to be that separation.
Amen.
Well, before David comes popping out of there to tell me that my 5 minutes, and my extra minutes have gone, I will be continuing this, chapter 20 of Deuteronomy, in 2 weeks. On Saturday, November 13th at 3 p.m. Live streaming will resume next Saturday, November the 6th at 1 p.m. Hallelujah, praise Yahweh. Hallelujah, Yeshua, praise Yeshua, Yah's salvation.